So, I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to do something entirely different on that USB plug right there. Because I noticed on the motherboard, where is it, right here, is a nice little USB module with an S400 Firewire bus right on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and cut through here with the Sawzall and cut down through here so that I'm taking out this entire piece of circuit board right here. And then I'll solder on the USB wires onto the bottom here, and that will make it to where it looks factory. Watch me butcher this thing up. Oh yeah, we're vibrating off capacitors and all kinds of good stuff. Oops. Probably should use something thinner than a wood blade. There we go. Just like that. Handy dandy little module. Super duper one to the customer only, my friends. And then it fits right in there. It even has a screw hole for it to be screwed down. I'll probably put one through the front where the firewire goes because we won't use that. And then the end, it'll look like that. Okay, so I've decided that I'm not going to use this part, this adapter here. Where is it? Right there. That goes from the USB cables to the USB jack. And you've seen previously, I cut this part off the main board. It's got the USB jacks, got the panel mount, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's basically places where we can solder on some old cable. I'm going to just cut one of the ends off of this cable here, cut this little puppy off, and solder it directly to this board. And from that point, it'll get plugged into the Raspberry Pi, and I've actually got two of these cables here to do this. Check this with an ohm meter, and the pins come straight down from left to right. These pins are left to right on the bottom. There's nothing fancy about it, so it should be pretty easy to match up left to right pins in here to left to right here. Probably have to use a multi-tester to figure out which wires with positive, negative data, positive, negative data. So I'll get that going. So what we end up with is we basically have a USB cable. It's got the shielding here to keep stray signals from coming in. These two are the data lines, the yellow and the white and the green. And the black and red are the positive and negative 5 volts that, you know, typically charge your phone or provide power to the device at hand. And we will basically just solder them right here. Got the iron going hot, and we shall demonstrate as so. So many of these USB cables have got different wiring. Usually black and white is always in them for positive and negative. If you don't know the pin out on the USB jacks, and you want to make sure you get your right plug in the right hole, or your right wire soldered to the right one on the back, you can use a multi-tester. And for argument's sake, we'll say, let's test and see where the green wire goes, shall we? You got the set on ohm so that you can see what's going on here, and then you just hit this one. Nothing there, nothing there, nothing there. Maybe it's the other plug. Yep, there we go. Looks like it. Nope. Guess I had two wires touching there. You see that, how it went virtually to nothing? 0.7, 0.4, 0.1 ohms. So the green wire will basically just solder it right onto that pin right there. And if you want to plug it into the other plug, it should be the same story for it as well. Should be in the same position. So once you get these tested out with a ohm meter, you should be able to figure out exactly where all the wires should go, and they'd be wired straight through. And just like that, we got one of them done. Probably put some tape or maybe a little bit of hot glue over these connectors when we get them all soldered on, just to keep them from wiggling loose. And through the miracles of modern editing, voila, the wires are soldered on. So we're at the power supply board, and as you can see, it's got negative and positive and a handy dandy little plug on the back. We're going to take this off, and this is going to be where we're going to put the 5-volt power regulator. We can get this plug to come off somewhat easy, I hope. Yeah, it's starting to come. I'm just applying a gentle pressure on the back, sort of rolling it out. Oh, I missed one pin. Missed one pin. And now I have all the pins out. We'll clean these holes up a little bit. That's my Cole the kitty you can hear in the background. What is it, buddy? Yeah? Yeah? Yeah, you're talking. So we'll clean these holes out and pretty much just stick a 5-volt regulator right in there with the pin coming out, and we'll bring a positive negative over to plug it directly into this header bar here. I think that'll take 5 volts. I'll have to double check. Some of these, they started putting 3-volt regulators on these things. I don't know. We'll have to double check, make sure we're not overdriving it, but I think there is a 5-volt source pin on the top of this header. Okay, so we got that 7805 voltage regulator put into the board, where we just took out the plug. And we're going to solder it in. Make it all nice and so the 7805 voltage regulator has 3 pins. It has an input, a ground, and an output. We hook the input, pin number 1, to the positive, the ground to pin number 2, and then on the other side, we basically have this wild pin coming off here that will go for the hot to the Raspberry Pi. And that's how you change a 12-volt power supply into a 5-volt power supply. Should be good. So we got the positive voltage regulated out here. I'm going to use basically a jumper header. Some hookup wires. We'll put, let's make green positive and blue negative, shall we? Just screw that on there. We'll clip this other end off to hook it onto the negative. Solder it on, and oh, the hell with it. We'll solder on both. We'll solder both the positive and the negative lead on, just so that it doesn't wiggle around and do anything weird. So when we got it all soldered together, we should have these pins that we can plug right down onto the header on the Raspberry Pi, and these are all soldered in. Should be pretty solid. I don't think they're going to go anywhere. So the first 3 pins on the outside, 1, 2, 3. The first 2 are positive 5 volt, and then the third one is ground. So we got these plugged in. That should provide the Raspberry Pi with the 5-volt rail that it needs, instead of having to plug it into the USB port. It should backfeed and run all the 3.3 volt regulator and all that. Apparently, the Raspberry Pi 3 does not have a reset pin anywhere on here like you would expect an Arduino or something to have a reset pin. Apparently they don't have a reset, so that kind of throws the whole front panel reset button out the window. But in the meantime, we'll throw a couple of heat sinks on these Broadcom chips. Not that we're going to overclock it. I mean, it's like the light that burns twice as bright burns half as long. And I don't know if it's worthwhile to overclock it for the extra tiny bit of percentage of power that you get out of it, extra horsepower speed. So we're just going to put the heat sinks on anyway, so it runs really cool, and basically we never have to look at it again. We can just let this thing run. Unless, of course, they come out with Raspberry Pi 4. We may want to upgrade that little board to the 4 if they ever come out with one. At least that's the rumor. They got the rumor that they're going to come out with a Raspberry Pi 4. And I don't know if it's going to be an octo-core. Octo-core. 8 cores. That would be pretty sweet. Yeah, just like that. It's like magic. Got heat sinks and everything. Got the board mounted, got the heat sinks on the Pi. We need to bring out the, we're going to put in a Wi-Fi, little Wi-Fi dongle here. Just a cheap, oops. Yeah, 802.11n. This is a tiny little 802.11n Wi-Fi dongle that'll plug in one of the USB ports in the back. Then we have the, because we're going to run Kodi, we want to have the ability to type messages in there or type text in there. This is not, what is this? What is this evilness? Oh my goodness. That doesn't look like a remote. How come I got freaking solar panels in there? Okay, we'll show you the remote later. So I thought I'd take a second here and show you that what we're doing with this plug here, this Ethernet plug. It's got the standard RJ45. This will be the crimp plug that we put on the other end of the cable. We're soldering these so that on these plugs, the important thing to remember is you got pin 1, 2, 3, all the way to 8. And so you got the first two are data, the third one is data, and the sixth one is data. On gigabit you need to use all 8 wires, but for 10100 you only need to use 4. Just for giggles, I'm going to put all 8 wires in and make sure that what comes out of here, each one of these wires, 1, 2, 3, well actually it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in that direction, because this plug plugs in this way. Nope, plugs in this way. Sorry. Plugs in that way, and I don't like to plug in because it hasn't crimped yet, so I'll finish wiring this up, get them all taped together, and then we'll move on to the next bit. Just make sure that pin 1 here means pin 1 at the plug. So pin 1 to pin 1, pin 2 to pin 2, pin 3 to etc., etc. You get the idea. Not worried about having any real loss on the twisted pair on this short of a run. It would make a big difference if you were running the cable a long distance, but since we're just making a little jumper cable to go from the Raspberry Pi to the back of the box, I don't think it's going to matter much. So we got this all wired up. Got a little bit of tape around the wires there to keep them from shorting out, and then we've got the plug on the other end. So this will make our little jumper cable to go from the back of the PS2 to the Raspberry Pi. We also got one of these handy dandy micro SD card readers that is basically glued into the old PlayStation 2 controller board, and this will allow us to bring out the memory card right to the front of the box and plug it in back where the Raspberry Pi is. So we're getting pretty short here on construction. It's basically going to just throw the whole thing together and plug it in and let it rip. So one of the issues that I got here is that when you order things from
China, 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 China.
Well, you get the idea. The adapter that goes from the HDMI to the panel mount HDMI that I was going to put in here didn't show up, so I don't have a lot of time to continue with this project right now because I got another one coming up for you guys. I'm just going to hook in the cable, run a regular HDMI cable out the back of it, and we'll get this thing rolling. And there we go, folks. The case is back together. CD-ROM. Got the card slot here for the Raspberry Pi compact flash. Got a hole back here because this is where the Ethernet, and when I get the HDMI cable, it'll come out the back here. And let's go hook this thing up and get her rocking.
Hope you're ready. It'll be here any minute. Is that a rifle?
You don't know what a rifle looks like?
It's just swords were your thing and guns were mine.